Common Sense Caucus, joined here with some of my colleagues. Some of them are Republicans, some of them are moderate Democrats, and we're here to say that we are not coming after abortion. In fact, no one's coming after abortion, a right that's been enshrined in this state for many years. There is no danger of abortion being overturned in the state of New York. That's not happening. And yet, if you speak to the advocates for Prop 1, they want you to believe that this is a sole vote on the issue of women's right to choose. That is a falsehood. This is a vote against your parental rights. This is a vote against women's athletics. This is a vote against your choice. This is a vote against the freedoms of expressions that are enshrined elsewhere in the state constitution. And it's ironic today that we are here in front of a stage that's celebrating the pinnacle of women's sports, the pinnacle of women's sports. The New York Liberty delivered a championship victory 2 nights ago. And it's ironic that we're talking about eroding the concept of women's sports and the empowerment of women's sports that have lifted, not just women into the professional stratosphere like in New York Liberty, but think of how many women were given scholarships to big schools, small schools, that have opened doors that would not have been opened, that have given people a sense of purpose. All this is in jeopardy because of one innocuous abortion proposition that ironically doesn't mention the word abortion. So I am joined by a number of folks today that are going to outline some of the problems with this proposition. I'd like to call up first Paula Scanlan, a swimmer from UPenn, who had the distinct pleasure of having a very famous teammate over the years. First, Paula.
Hi, thank you all so much, for being here today. My mom immigrated to New York City from Taiwan back in the 60s, and so I've been here my entire life. I now currently live in New York. I moved here after studying at the University of Pennsylvania, so it just means the world to be able to advocate for things right where I live. Really briefly, I was a member of the University of Pennsylvania women's swim team, where we were told that a man had to be accepted onto our team, and in this experience, the university told us to never speak out against it. And if we did, we were told we were horrible people. We went on and watched Thomas win an NCAA champion, beating out many, many well-accomplished female athletes. And it was a great disservice to all of us women and horrible to experience on a sports team. And it was not the experience that I went to University of Pennsylvania to swim. But with this, I'm now advocating against men competing in women's sports. And it is crazy that I'm here today having to advocate against this in my own home state of New York. This is an experience that I experienced, and I want no women to go through it. But we have a proposition on the ballot this November that is going to do exactly what I experienced to thousands of female athletes in New York City. It is the most anti-women piece of legislation that I've seen come through, and it is going to eradicate women's rights in the state of New York. It is heartbreaking to see this. I can't imagine having any more female athletes experience what I went through. Losing opportunities to compete in sports, being forced to undress with men in locker rooms. This is a reality that I experienced that will become law here in New York. And what do the people think about this? Well, the women in New York and the female athletes at high school levels all have a statewide walkout coming up on October 24th, later this week, against men competing in their sports. New Yorkers do not want this. I do not want this. Everyone around here does not want this. And so, I urge all of you, if you care about the women in your life having rights in sports, having equal opportunities, and you also care about them not experiencing what I did at the University of Pennsylvania, please say no to Prop 1. In just 2 weeks, we're voting on this, and I urge all of you to protect women and say no. This is not controversial. This is not one party or another. This is about women and girls. And the women and girls in New York do not want this because they're walking out against it. Nobody wants to watch men take opportunities away from women. I do not want it, and I will continue to advocate against it. But please, I urge all of you to say no. And just thank you so much for listening to this. And thank you so much for caring about this issue, because this is so important that we raise awareness to it. Tell your friends, bring people to the polls, and tell them to say no to this proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear civil and constitutional attorney Bobbie Anne Cox.
Thank you, Councilman Barilli, and thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. My name is Bobbie Anne Cox. I'm a constitutional law attorney here in New York State, and I am speaking out against Prop 1. Prop 1 is a Trojan horse of epic proportions. If it passes, it's going to turn our norms and things that we hold most dear upside down. Boys will have a constitutional right to play in girls' sports. Men will have a constitutional right to use women's spaces like locker rooms, bathrooms, dormitories, sororities, prisons, and so on. We will see the door open for non-citizens, whether they're here legally or illegally, to claim the same rights as New Yorkers. Those could be monetary, like the right to public assistance, welfare, subsidized benefits, subsidized healthcare, subsidized housing, and whatnot. But it also opens the door for them to possibly gain the right to vote, our sacred right to vote in our elections to determine who runs our government. And they want to open that up to people that are not from our country. If Prop 1 passes, it's going to severely weaken parental rights. There is already, now today, we saw last year, in 2023, the New York State Department of Education issued a guidance. And that guidance tells schools in New York State how they're supposed to handle the situation when they have children in their school that are looking to change their sex or perhaps want to identify with the opposite gender. And in that guidance, it says in black and white, you are not allowed to tell the parents what is going on. If Prop 1 passes, it will give the government the right to discriminate against you as long as they're doing it in the name of fixing past discrimination or preventing future discrimination. The overly broad language is not appropriate. It is illegal to have language in our laws which is overly broad because it leads to chaos in the aftermath. And then we will have to fight out in court for years to come the real definition of specific language. This is all already happening. I mentioned the New York State Department of Education guidance. We also saw a law passed right here in New York City 2 years ago that gave non-citizens the right to vote in our elections. Now, we looked at the language. It said non-citizens that were here legally, but it also opened the door to say people that were here could be illegally, but had the authority to work, could also vote in our elections. That was challenged, that was struck down because it's unconstitutional. However, the mayor of New York City is appealing that case. They want to give non-citizens our sacred right to vote. I'm also seeing it personally when I go to courthouses around the state. I see signs on the women's bathroom that says, you have the right to use a bathroom with the gender that you identify with. What happened to my rights? What happened to women's rights? In Westchester County right now, there is a lawsuit going on, which is over a speech code that was issued by a local public school district. The speech code tells the students that they must call somebody in the school, teacher, fellow students, administrators, whatever, by their preferred pronoun. Otherwise, they will be in violation of the speech code and they will be penalized. A group of parents got together and are suing over that provision. That is not my case, so I don't know exactly where that case stands, but it is in the courts right now. Why is Prop 1 a Trojan horse? Well, first and foremost, they're calling it the Equal Rights Amendment. That language does not appear on your ballot. That language does not appear in the language that will go into our Constitution if this passes. It is not an Equal Rights Amendment. Number two, you don't even see the language that's going to go into the Constitution. What is on your ballot, New York, please listen to me, is 2 sentences which summarize what this amendment would be, that what they want to go into our Constitution. So you don't even get to see the real language. Furthermore, you don't get to see or hear anything about, in that summary, paragraph B. And paragraph B is very toxic. It allows the government to discriminate against you if they're doing so because they're saying they're trying to reverse past discrimination. You don't even get to see that that is part of this proposed amendment to our Constitution. They say it's all about abortions, but as Councilman Borelli said, the word abortion is not even in the language. Furthermore, abortion has been codified in our state laws in New York State since 1970. So for over 50 years, we have had very lenient abortion laws. Today in New York State, you can get an abortion right up until the day of birth. And you know what? It's not under threat. Nobody's trying to take that away. In closing, I am going to say that this is not a political issue. It is not about left or right. It is not about Republican or Democrat. I myself am a lifelong Democrat, but I am a constitutionalist, and I'm standing here today to tell you that this is an unconstitutional ballot proposal. People need to vote this down. We did just launch a website where people can get more information about Prop 1 and its dangers and legal ramifications. That is called, the website is www.votenoonprop1, the number 1, votenoonprop1.org. I really encourage everybody to take the time and please check out our website. And thank you all for coming today.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from some of our council members, starting with Joanne Ariola.
Thank you, Minority Leader Joe Borelli, and for all who I stand with here today against the Trojan horse known as Proposition 1. I'm proud to stand here today with women like Paula Scanlan and Bobbie Anne Cox, two outspoken leaders who are fighting for the rights of women everywhere against a system that's trying to erase us. Let's be clear. Proposition 1 is not a Republican or Democratic issue. It is about our fundamental rights as women, as parents, and as American citizens. Do not let its flowery name fool you. Supporters falsely tout that this is an equal rights amendment and have churned out volumes of contorted facts and paid propaganda to deceive New Yorkers to make their case. But this legislation would do just the opposite of what it claims. If passed, this proposition would strip away protections that so many of our foremothers have fought so hard to achieve. This proposition would kick open the door for men to invade women's spaces, bathrooms, ball fields, and it will set the cause of women's rights in this country back generations. Women like Paula should not have to endure the humiliation she experienced because the far left demands it. Young girls should not be forced to share changing rooms with biological men, and female athletes should not have to have their dreams dashed by an assigned at birth male dominating their sport. These are very real issues that women and girls across the country are facing right now, and they are affecting people whose voices, like Paula's, and that the radical left want to silence. Proposition 1 will complete that silencing and codify their suffering into law. And that's not all. As Bobbie Anne stated, the terms of Prop 1 are intentionally vague so that radical progressive judges will have a free hand in the future to interpret them and make the law that will cause irreparable harm to New Yorkers. Not only will it enable biological males to use women's facilities, but it has the potential to give illegal immigrants the right to vote, bankrupt our senior services, and more. When we've already seen these judges misread our laws before with their misguided decisions regarding COVID-19 vaccine mandates and the right to shelter consent decree, we cannot allow them another free hand to continue their assaults on the rights of women and as Americans. We cannot afford to let Prop 1 dismantle the protections we fought so hard for. This is a fight for the future of women, for the future of girls, for our daughters, nieces, and women and girls around this country, and here, especially in New York City. And we must stand united to stop it. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Community Education Council number 2, Representative Maron.
Thank you so much to everybody that has spoken already and to everyone that's here. I want to speak as a parent of 4, well, actually, I'm now a parent of 3 New York City public school students because my eldest child graduated from the New York City public schools. But I have 3 students in the public schools right now, including a daughter who is an athlete in the New York City Public School Athletic League. Her rights as a female athlete and the rights of all of our female athletes really need to be respected by all of the leaders of our city, Republican and Democrat, of course. This should not be a partisan issue to respect the right of female athletes. But I just want to tell you briefly of an experience that I had trying to speak up and ask for respectful dialogue in this city as an elected parent leader and as a mom. I wrote and my council passed a resolution that respectfully requested, that was the language, we respectfully requested a review of the 2019 gender guidelines. Those gender guidelines, as has already been pointed out, mandate keep withholding information from parents about their children's psychosocial gender confusion when they're in schools. And it also mandates that boys who say they are girls get to compete on girls' teams. The reason we're here today is for Proposition 1. That language in those gender guidelines is hard enough to challenge now. And I'm going to tell you what happened when I tried to ask for a review. If Proposition 1 passes, the prohibition against telling boys that they can't be on girls' teams is going to be in our Constitution. And so for parents or for anyone who thinks that's not fair to girls, it's not fair, and we should at a minimum be able to have a conversation about it, we need to vote no on Prop 1. All parents need to vote no on Prop 1. All New Yorkers should vote no on Prop 1. And just to tell you what happened, we passed a resolution. That's democracy, right? We hear a lot of things about defending democracy. Well, democracy is you get yourself elected to a council, you put forth a resolution, your council members vote on it, and it passes. Well, what happened when we passed our resolution saying, hey, can we talk about the gender guidelines? They were passed 5 years ago, and in those 5 years, we've learned a lot of new information. Countries like Sweden and England have done systemic reviews and said, you know what? There isn't good evidence to support these so-called gender-affirming procedures on minors. And so we said, our council said, can we have a review? And this time, when we review these guidelines, can we include female athletes? Can we include parents? Can we include doctors? Well, what happened? A few days later, I get a letter addressed to my council from Congressman Jerry Nadler, who's one of the most senior congressmen in our country and certainly in our city, saying that our request for that review was bigoted, hateful, likely to cause harm. So I ask you, when parents get together and say, can we have a review that includes female athletes and includes parents, when we have 18 members of New York City's elected, all Democrats, who said, and I say that as a woman who voted for Jerry Nadler many times and voted as a Democrat, a mistake I won't make again, but as a woman who's been a Democrat for a very long time, up until very recently, it was 18 Democrats who said that we couldn't even have the conversation. And it's those same leaders who are pushing Proposition 1. And so I want to say that if you're not even allowed to have a conversation now, when that ability to talk about these procedures that are happening to our children gets embedded in the Constitution, it's going to be even harder. And it should not be hard for parents to talk about the rules and regulations that impact their children, that impact their children's health, and that impact their children's bodies. So for that reason, and many more which have been eloquently described here, but for that reason alone, you should vote no on Prop 1.
Next, we'll hear from the Bronx, Christy Marmorano, District 13, Representative.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I stand before you not just a councilwoman, but as a mother and a former healthcare worker. And I urge you with a simple message to vote no against Prop 1. And I want to be clear, because this proposal is not about women's rights or protecting anyone's fundamental freedoms. Instead, it's an overreach by our state into rights of parents and families, and its risks taking away our parental authority. Prop 1 claims to expand protections against discrimination, but it's written in such a broad and vague language in a way that it opens the door to governmental interference in how we raise our kids. It will also give our children rights at a premature age. They will have the ability to make medical decisions for themselves without parental consent, and some of these decisions can be dangerous and irreversible. As parents, it's our responsibility for children's well-being. We are the ones who should guide them through life's complex issues and making the best choices with them when it comes to their health care. We know our kids best. We deserve to be a part of those conversations without fear that our rights will be overwritten by the state with this new legal interpretation. Prop 1 has nothing to do with ensuring basic fairness and everything to do with expanding state control. It's not about adding protections, it's about shifting power away from families and giving it to the state. So today I'm calling on all of the mothers, fathers, grandparents, and guardians. Stand with me. Let's protect our children together by voting no on Prop 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Wai Wah Chin, the founding member of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance of Greater New York and a fellow of the Manhattan.
Thank you. I'm here to speak a little bit of what everybody said because everything that's been said here is important. This is very important how it affects all the New Yorkers in the city, in the state, and it's not just about women. We've heard a lot of things about how it affects women, how it's going to hurt the sports, and not just in sports, but outside too, okay? It's not just in school and in sports, but outside when they look at ways to discriminate. New York is a place that belongs to all of us. This is a city that is built of immigrants from all over the world. And this, I'm going to expand from what Chrissy just said here. It's not just broad and vague language. It is sleazy language, okay? This is really sleazy what's happened here with the legislators. They've taken a piece of legislation. Once upon a time in the Constitution, it was 50-some words, and they expanded to 150 words. And it's filled with all sorts of nonsense. They've taken several protected classes, 4 protected classes. You know, you could say, let's protect all people and make a couple of notes about who to include additionally, just so that you don't forget. But they included in this language 11 new protected classes. 11 is ridiculous. You don't even know which one you're protecting today. And in fact, once you list so many, there's a good question, how about the ones you didn't list? Okay? That doesn't work that way, right? And if you look down at all the injustices done to families, to parents, to women, they forget that it's about all the groups here in New York too. And Part B deals with that. Part B takes, and it's a lot of language that didn't even exist in the Constitution before, completely new. It says basically that anything we said in Part A, it doesn't really count. We could discriminate against all of that if we want to. We can discriminate against that, meaning we have reverse discrimination codified in your laws. That is extremely disruptive to our civil society, and it is actually unconstitutional by the U.S. Constitution. So what does that mean? We're going to have to go and fight this in the courts forever. But when you have reverse discrimination allowed, you're pitting all the groups of different people in this city against one another. As a person of Asian descent, we know that this notion of discrimination has existed very long, in education in particular, when they say there are too many Asians in certain schools. Well, and before that they said that there were too many Jews in these schools. You could go down the list, right? And this is something that is abominable. We should not be doing that to our kids. We should not be doing it beyond that, because the way Part B is constructed, you can devise not just laws, but you can devise policies and programs so anybody with not even a legislator or an executive here, but a smaller person, like even a custodian or principal in a school could decide that I am going to prevent or reverse discriminate. That is extremely dangerous and contrary to our notion of what we are as a group, as a people in this city. So if this Prop 1 is too vague, too broad, and sleazy for what they wanted to do. It doesn't do any of the things that it's marketed to do, and what we should all do, because it affects every single person here. There's something that for every single person hate. We must all vote no on Prop 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Councilmember Vicky Palladino.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, here we stand before you once again, pleading for some sort of sanity. We've heard from everybody behind me, alongside me, exactly what is wrong with Proposition 1. We've heard it called the Trojan horse. We've heard it called a fallacy. We've heard it called sleazy. You know what? It is exactly that. We stand in front of a stage that they are going to celebrate, as my colleague said, they're going to stand with the women who just won the Liberty basketball. Ask those women, because those are the very women who won fair and square as women, as biological women. Now, for all these people who put their hands up in the air and scream about women's rights and the woman's right to choose, well, you know what? You live in New York. Your abortion rights will never, ever, ever be taken away from you. This vote, they don't even mention the word abortion. What we want is what we deserve as women, as mothers, as grandmothers, as aunts. We want our kids treated fairly. It's as simple as that. If you are a man or a boy, you may not be in my granddaughter's or my niece's bathrooms or locker rooms. We listen to our swimmer here. Fantastic voice. Absolute clear, crystal clear as to why she was intimidated. We heard from a mother here who tried to fight for her child in school. But because of Jerry Nadler and his radical left-wing ways, and we say we are not political, but indeed, guess what? The left once again has made this political. Because you can see the difference. Do you see any other Democrats standing out alongside us here other than Bob Holden? Okay? Do you see any other Democrat women standing out here fighting for equal rights for women? No. This is all about gender equality. Gender equality, absolutely, but not in the locker room, not in the schools, and you may not take the right away from the parents to decide what is best for their children. As soon as the government puts their nose in your house, we've got a problem. And that is why Proposition 1 must be voted down. Now listen very carefully. Do not leave it blank. Turn that over, color in the dot, so everybody knows you voted no. If you leave it empty, then you're in between. Absolutely not. Color in the dot. It's no on Proposition 1. Thank you very much.
So, thank you. Any questions from the media first?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't want to.
Well, in your estimation, how many trans athletes do you think are currently participating in sports at the, high school level in New York
I
State?
have no idea.
So, do you have any sense of how sort of
Tell you,
glaring
none
a
of the
problem this
WNBA.
is? Sorry?
There's no genetic born males in the WNBA. WNBA were out here celebrating their win, but I have no idea as far as high school.
So, but I guess could you maybe give me a sense of what, or anybody, what your sort of impression is of sort of the size of this problem?
Well, hold on. I want to just talk about the size.
Sure.
We're not on our back foot here because we stand with the majority of Americans and the majority of New Yorkers. 69% of people in a Gallup poll believe that women belong in women's sports and men belong in men's sports. 66% of New Yorkers in a recent Siena poll feel the same way. So we're not going to approach this on our back foot and ho-hum about why we feel this way. We are with the majority of people in this state and in this city who think that this is the right way to go, voting no. Once you add in the bathroom components and other areas, I think the number of people that would support voting against this actually increases. Anyone else want to add?
So I want to mention a current ongoing litigation that kind of speaks to what you're.
Is this the Westchester case?
No. This is actually in Nassau County. The county executive, Bruce Blakeman, and the Nassau County legislature is entwined in a lawsuit right now with the state because Letitia James, our attorney general, is suing them because they passed a local law for the county that says that any sports teams that use their county facilities have to have the same, if it's a girls' sports team, then it's girls on the team, not trans athletes. If it's a boys, same for the boys. And I want to point out, because this gets twisted a lot in the media, they're not saying that trans athletes can't play sports. They're saying you just can't play on the opposite sex sports teams. So you can have a league that's co-ed. You can play sports on the sex that you have, that you were born into. This is simply saying you can't infringe on the women's rights, the girls' rights to have their own sports. That's what Title IX is all about. And I know Title IX is federal, but Title IX specifically is for protecting women, protecting females. And, the stunt that the Biden and Harris administration pulled with trying to change the language of Title IX by, adding a few words, flipped it upside down on its head, because all of a sudden they said instead of sex, now it includes also gender expression and gender orientation and sexual orientation and whatnot. And that's being fought in the courts and is going to be struck down because it is completely, that's a separation of powers issue, slightly different. Agencies can't change law, only Congress can change law. But neither here nor there. I think that issue that lawsuit that's going on right now in Nassau County is a perfect example of what.
What was the Westchester lawsuit that you referenced? Did you have any more details on that by chance?
I don't. It's not my case,
okay.
So I don't. But if you want to see me after, perhaps I can give you more details to try and find the specific case. But yeah, it's not my case, so I don't know where it is. I can't really speak to much more than I already have.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, Christopher Leon Johnson. This is more a Republican effort, right? This is done by the New York GOP. We're in a liberal state. How are you going to fight this in New York City despite that?
Like I said, when the polling on the majority of these issues, even when we dance around the equal rights for national origin, the polling on this is all in our favor. We represent the majority view of this state, not the progressive left. So it's more a question of getting the word out there that this is the reality of what this proposition means, and hopefully getting it in people's heads of what they're actually voting for, and reminding them to actually turn over the ballot. Questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.